The door slammed shut behind them, the latch snapping like a gunshot, and the cabin went dark except for the violent pulse of wind shaking the walls. Someone was bleeding. Someone was lying. Michael Carter stood frozen for half a second, listening to the storm claw at the logs, as if it meant to tear the mountain open and take whatever was inside. The radio on his belt crackled. Once then died. No signal. No help. Just the sound of a woman gasping on the floor, and the low mechanical groan of an old structure pushed past its limits. Outside the whiteout swallowed everything. Road, trees, direction. The world had narrowed to this cabin, and the people trapped inside it. Moments earlier, Michael had been flagged down on the access road by a black SUV, jackknifed across the snow, its hazard lights blinking weakly like a failing heartbeat. He had known that look. Panic wrapped in metal. He had stopped because stopping was what he did now. Ever since the night the sheriff knocked on his door and told him his wife was not coming home. Michael Carter no longer drove past trouble. He was 59. His knees ached in the cold. His left shoulder never fully healed after a logging accident years ago. But his hands were steady. They always were when things went bad. The woman from the SUV was conscious then. Barely. Her coat was too thin, her face too pale. She had tried to say something, but the wind tore it away. Michael had taken one look at the sky and known the mountain was about to close its fist. Now she lay on the cabin floor. Breath-shallow eyes, glassy, one hand clenched around her phone, as if it might still work if she believed hard enough. Another figure stood near the door. Younger, male, late 20s, maybe early 30s. City jacket, clean boots already soaked through. His jaw was tight, eyes darting adrenaline, burning itself out into fear. "I told her not to take this road," he said, voice sharp, defensive. "I told her. She wouldn't listen." Michael didn't answer. He dropped to one knee beside the woman, checked her pulse, then her pupils. Concussion. Cold shock. Not good, but not dying yet. "What's your name?" Michael asked her loud enough to cut through the wind. Her lips moved. No sound. The younger man stepped forward, then stopped as if unsure whether he was allowed to exist in this moment. "Her name's Claire," he said. "Claire Whitman. She's important." Michael looked up slowly. His eyes were calm, evaluating. "Right now," he said, "she's hurt." "That's what she is." He shrugged off his pack, pulled out a thermal wrap, moved with practiced economy. He had done this before. Not often, but enough. Enough to know that panic wastes heat. The cabin was not abandoned in the way people imagined abandonment. It was a former Forest Service shelter, taken off the active map, but never stripped. A stove, a first aid box, emergency blankets, logs stacked by someone who believed strangers were worth planning for. Michael got the stove lit after 2 tries. Smoke curled, then cleared. The temperature rose by inches, not miles. The young man hovered. "We need to call someone." "She can't stay here. There's no call to make," Michael said. Storm took the tower. Took the road, too. How do you know Michael didn't look at him? "Because I live here." That shut him up. Minutes stretched. Claire's breathing steadied but didn't deepen. Her fingers twitched, then stilled. The wind screamed louder, as if angry at being locked out. The young man finally spoke again. "You don't understand who she is." Michael turned. Really turned this time. His voice didn't rise. "You don't understand where you are." Something in that landed. The man swallowed, looked around. The walls, the stove. The woman on the floor, who no longer looked powerful enough to scare anyone. "My name's Ethan," he said quietly. "I work for her. Security." Michael nodded once, not impressed, not dismissive, just filing it away. He checked the stove, then the door. Snow was already piling against it. They were not leaving tonight. Maybe not tomorrow morning either. Claire stirred. A sound escaped her throat. Half pain, half fear. Her eyes opened unfocused, then locked onto Michael's face. "Don't move," he said, firm but gentle. "You're safe. For now." Her gaze slid to the cabin, the stove, the stranger standing too far away. Confusion sharpened into alarm. "Where am I?" she whispered. "Shelter," Michael said. "Storm forced us in." She tried to push herself up. Her arms failed her. She sucked in a breath that trembled on the way out. Ethan rushed forward. "Claire, just stay still." "Okay, please." She waved him off weakly. Eyes never leaving Michael. Studying him. Measuring. "You," she said. "You stopped." "Yes." Why Michael didn't answer right away. He adjusted the wrap around her shoulders. The fabric crinkled. The stove popped. "Because no one else did," he said. That was the first crack. Her jaw tightened. Something old flashed across her face. Recognition, or maybe resentment. Outside, a deep sound rolled across the mountain. Not thunder. Something heavier. A warning. Michael's radio crackled again. A single burst of static. Then a voice distorted. "Units advised avalanche risk, all routes closed." Then nothing. Ethan's face drained of color. "That means—" "It means we're staying," Michael said. "And it means we need to be smart." Claire's breathing quickened. Her hands shook now. Not just from cold. "I have a meeting," she said. "Even now. Even here." Michael looked at her. Really looked. The manic edge behind the composure. The exhaustion buried under command. "The mountain doesn't care," he said. Silence followed. Heavy. Unforgiving. The stove hissed. The wind roared. Snow hammered the roof like fists. Claire's teeth began to chatter. Her lips turned a shade too pale. Michael reached for the only heavy blanket left hanging on a nail by the stove. He hesitated. Not because of her. Because of the memory that rose uninvited. White sheets. A hospital room. His wife's hand cooling in his. He shook it off. Survival was louder. He draped the blanket around her, then sat back on his heels, creating space. Professional. Controlled. Minutes passed. Then more. Her shivering worsened. Ethan looked at Michael. "She's getting worse." Michael nodded. "I see it." Claire's voice came out thin, almost embarrassed. "The heat isn't enough." Michael didn't respond. She swallowed. Her eyes flicked to the blanket, then to him, then away. The words came out barely louder than the storm. Can I slip under your blanket?" The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Ethan stiffened, shocked, offended, unsure. Michael didn't move. Not yet. He looked at Claire, not as a man, as a judge of necessity. This was not intimacy. This was triage, and somewhere deep beneath the ice and noise and pressure, something larger had begun to shift. Michael didn't answer right away. He shifted his weight, listening past the wind, past Ethan's sharp breathing into the deeper quiet where decisions lived. Claire's shivering had turned uneven, jerking through her frame in waves that no blanket could stop on its own. Hypothermia was no longer a possibility. It was knocking. "All right," he said at last. One word. Flat. Final. He adjusted his position on the floor, back against the log wall, knees, bent just enough to create space without turning it into something else. He lifted the edge of the blanket with 2 fingers, slow and deliberate, giving her the choice again, in case pride wanted to step in and ruin things. She didn't hesitate this time. Claire moved carefully every inch, an effort sliding closer until her shoulder brushed his chest. Her breath hitched at the contact, then steadied when warmth reached her skin. She kept her hands folded tight against herself, eyes shut, jaw clenched, as if bracing for judgment that never came. Michael wrapped the blanket around them both, leaving space at the top so air could move. His body stayed rigid muscles, locked not with fear, but with control. He had learned a long time ago that stillness could be an act of care. Ethan took an instinctive step back, color rising in his face. "This is necessary," Michael said, without looking at him. Ethan swallowed whatever else he was going to say. He paced once, then stopped near the stove, rubbing his hands together too fast to be useful. The power dynamic in the room had shifted, and he felt it. Not because of the blanket, but because Michael had decided something, and decisions were obeyed here. Claire's shivering slowed, not stopped, but changed, becoming smaller, more controlled. Her head rested lightly against Michael's shoulder. He could feel the tremor in her breath easing, count the seconds between each inhale without meaning to. Outside the storm howled harder, as if angered by the quiet forming inside the cabin. Minutes passed, maybe more. Time had lost its edges. Claire spoke without opening her eyes. "You're not afraid?" Michael stared at the door, at the thin line of light bleeding in around the frame. "I am," he said. "Just not of this." "What then?" He considered lying, letting it be something simple. But the night had a way of pulling truth out by the collar. "Of wasting time," he said. "Of leaving things undone." Her mouth curved barely. Not a smile. Something sadder. "That makes 2 of us." Ethan let out a humorless laugh. "You should see her calendar," he said, then stopped when Claire's eyes opened. She didn't look angry, just tired. "You should stop talking," she said softly. He nodded, chastened, and sank down onto a crate near the wall. His hands shook now, the adrenaline finally burning off, leaving only the reality of how close things had come. The stove popped again. A log shifted. The cabin smelled of smoke and wet wool. Claire's breathing deepened. Her weight settled more fully against Michael's side, still careful, still respectful. He didn't adjust. He let her find the balance. "Michael," she said quietly. He waited. "You didn't ask. Who I am." He exhaled slowly. Didn't need to. That earned him a look. Sharp despite the fatigue. Assessing despite everything. "You know," she said, "people usually need to know." Michael glanced down at her, then back to the door. "People usually want something." Silence followed. Dense, thoughtful. Ethan shifted. "We should ration," he said. "Food. Water." Michael nodded once, already counted. That caught Ethan's attention. "Counted before you asked." Ethan looked around, suddenly seeing the cabin not as a miracle, but as a system with limits. He pressed his lips together, recognizing competence when it stared him in the face. Claire closed her eyes again. Her voice came softer now, stripped of its edge. "My father used to say," that she murmured, "about storms, that they show you who's useful and who's loud." Michael felt something twist, small but sharp. He didn't comment. The wind battered the cabin for hours. Snow piled higher. At some point, the light outside shifted, not brighter, not darker, just different, as if the mountain had rotated a few degrees and decided to test them again. Claire slept. Not deeply, but enough. Michael stayed awake. Always did. He counted her breaths, then Ethan's, then the sounds of the structure itself, cataloguing creaks and groans, listening for the one that would mean trouble. At some point, Ethan spoke again, voice low. "She doesn't do this. Rely on people. Trust them." Michael didn't turn. "People don't usually earn it." "She earned hers the hard way," Ethan said. "Long before the company. Long before the press." Michael finally looked at him. Really looked. The man's eyes were red. His jaw clenched with something close to loyalty, and something closer to fear. "You worried about her?" Michael said. Ethan nodded. "I've seen what happens when she breaks." Michael let that sit. He adjusted the blanket just enough to cover Claire's shoulder again as it slipped. The movement was automatic, unnoticed. The radio crackled once more, faint, a whisper of sound that made all three of them freeze. Michael reached for it slowly, thumb hovering. He waited, listening. The signal died again. Claire stirred. "Was that nothing solid?" Michael said. "Yet." Her fingers tightened briefly in the fabric of his jacket, then relaxed as if embarrassed by the instinct. "I don't like this," she said. "Not the storm. Not the cabin. Something deeper." "No one does," Michael replied. "But you know how to sit in it." He thought of long nights alone of grief that didn't ask permission, of learning to exist inside discomfort without letting it rot you from the inside out. "You learn," he said. Her eyes searched his face as if trying to place him in a category that would make sense. She failed. Outside, a low rumble rolled through the ground. Not close. Not distant enough. Michael tensed. He felt it through the floor before he heard it, the mountain shifting its weight. Avalanche, maybe. Or a warning that the margin for error had just shrunk. Ethan stood abruptly. "What was that?" "Sit down," Michael said. "Fast movements don't help." Ethan obeyed. Claire swallowed. "If this goes bad, it won't," Michael said sharper now. Not a promise. A command. She held his gaze, something fierce flickering behind the exhaustion. "You don't know that." "No," he said. "But I know what to do next." The storm pressed in. The cabin held. For now. And somewhere in the dark, far beyond the reach of roads and titles and schedules, the first true fracture in Claire Whitman's armor widened just enough to let something human breathe. The sound came again, deeper this time, not loud but heavy, like the mountain clearing its throat before speaking. Michael felt it travel through the floor into his bones, a low pressure that made instinct rise before thought. "Ethan," he said quietly. "Kill the stove." Ethan froze. "What now?" Ethan lunged for the stove hands, clumsy with panic damper slamming shut as smoke curled and then thinned. The sudden drop in sound made the cabin feel naked. The wind outside didn't stop, but the quieter interior sharpened everything else. Wood settling. Snow sliding. The faint hiss of Claire's breath against Michael's jacket. "What's happening?" Claire whispered. "Nothing we can fix," Michael said. "And nothing we should provoke." Another rumble rolled through the ground, longer this time, followed by a distant crack that snapped the air. Snow slid off the roof in a soft rush. The cabin shuddered once, then stilled. Ethan's face had gone grey. "That was close." "Close is relative," Michael said. "We don't move until daylight changes." "How long?" Ethan asked. Michael didn't answer. He was listening to something else, now the mountain's afterbreath, the subtle shifts that meant danger had passed or was circling back. Minutes stretched into an hour. Or maybe 2. Claire's weight against him had grown warmer, steadier. Her breathing was no longer ragged, but there was a tension in her body that sleep wouldn't touch. "I keep thinking," she said quietly, "that someone will start yelling my name." Michael waited. In meetings, she continued. In airports, in hallways. Someone always wants something, needs something. "Tonight, no one's calling." Ethan snorted softly. "Trust me, they're calling. They just can't reach you." "That's worse," she said, then paused. "Or better." "I can't tell." Michael shifted slightly, careful not to disturb her. His leg had gone numb hours ago, pins and needles biting hard, but he ignored it. Pain was information, not an emergency. "You run something big," he said. She let out a quiet breath. "People think that's power." "You disagree." "I think it's leverage," she said. "And leverage cuts both ways." Outside, the wind changed pitch, less furious, now more exhausted. The storm was burning itself out slowly, angrily, like a thing that didn't want to admit defeat. The radio crackled again, louder this time. A broken voice pushed through, distorted, but real. "Repeat search units delayed secondary. Slide risk, shelter, in place." Ethan's head snapped up. "They know we're here." Michael nodded. "They know someone is." How long? Michael closed his eyes briefly. Did the math. Snowfall rate, temperature, distance. Half a day, maybe more. Ethan swore under his breath. then stopped when Claire shifted. Her eyes were open now, alert despite the fatigue. "I need to tell you something," she said, not looking at either of them. Michael stayed still. Ethan leaned forward. "I wasn't supposed to be on that road," she said. "Not officially." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Claire, let me finish." Her voice held steel, the kind that didn't need volume. "The meeting I told the board about was real. The reason for it wasn't." Michael felt the tension spike beside him. "There's an investigation," she continued. "Quiet. Federal. Someone inside the company leaked documents, financials, environmental reports. I came up here because the handoff was supposed to be off-grid." Ethan stood abruptly. "That's not what you said." Claire finally looked at him. "That's because I didn't know who I could trust." The words hung in the air, sharp and irrevocable. Michael exhaled slowly. He had not asked for this. Mountains had a way of pulling truth out, whether you wanted it or not. "Did someone follow you?" he asked. "I don't know," Claire said. "But if they did, the storm covered their tracks." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "This changes things." "It doesn't change the weather," Michael said. "And it doesn't change the rules." Claire turned her gaze back to him. "What rules?" "Out here," he said, "titles don't mean much, and secrets only matter if they put people in danger." She studied his face, searching for judgment. Found none. Only calculation. "I didn't mean to drag you into this," she said. Michael's mouth curved faintly humorless. "You didn't. The mountain did." Another sound reached them then. Not wind, not settling snow. A voice, faint, muffled, human. Ethan's head snapped toward the door. "Did you hear that Michael was already on his feet?" Joints protesting as blood rushed back into his leg. He moved to the door, ear pressed to the wood, hand raised for silence. The voice came again. "Male," shouting. Far, but not too far. Ethan's eyes widened. "Search team." Michael didn't answer. He was listening to the rhythm, the spacing, the urgency. "That's one voice," he said quietly. "Search teams don't send one person." Claire's breath caught. "Then who is it?" Michael stepped back from the door, face hardening. "Someone who wants to be heard, or someone who doesn't care if they are." The knock came sudden and loud, rattling the frame. 3 sharp hits. A pause. Then another. "Hello," the voice called. Anyone inside Ethan moved instinctively toward the door. Michael caught his arm grip iron. "Wait." The voice knocked again, harder now, impatient. Claire's heart hammered against Michael's side. He could feel it fast and strong fear cutting through fatigue. "Who are you?" Michael called out. "Name's Rick," the man said. "Snowmobile broke down. Saw smoke earlier." Michael's eyes flicked to the stove. Cold now. Silent. "No smoke," Michael said. "Not for hours." A pause. "Too long." "Maybe it drifted," Rick said. "I'm freezing out here." Michael met Ethan's gaze, a silent exchange. Trust was not automatic. Not tonight. "Search teams will be through here tomorrow," Michael said. "You should head downhill." "I can't," Rick snapped. My leg's messed up. Michael closed his eyes for half a second. The mountain had shifted again. Not snow this time. The shape of the night itself. He looked down at Claire. Her face was pale, but set eyes burning with a clarity that hadn't been there before. "This is where your world meets mine," he said quietly. Another knock, harder. Angry now. "Open the door," Rick barked. "I know you're in there." Michael didn't move. Inside the cabin, 3 lives balanced on a decision that would not be undone. Outside the storm waited patient and merciless to see who would break first. Michael kept his hand on the doorframe, not touching the latch, feeling the vibration of the man's weight through the wood. Rick knocked again, slower now, the rhythm practiced, as if he knew exactly how much pressure made people nervous enough to comply. "Last chance," Rick called. "I'm not asking anymore." Ethan's breathing went shallow. He looked at Michael, then at Claire, then back at the door. If he's hurt, he'll say where Michael said. And he'll answer questions. Michael raised his voice just enough to carry. "Which trail did you come from, Rick?" A beat. Wind hissed through the trees. "The South Cut," Rick said. Michael's jaw tightened. There was no South Cut within miles that a snowmobile could reach this late in the season. Not without crossing the old burn zone, and nobody did that in winter. "What color's your sled?" Michael asked. Another pause. Longer. "Red." Ethan mouthed the word wrong. Michael leaned closer to the door. "What's your last name?" Silence. Then a laugh, sharp and humorless. "You're real cautious for a guy hiding in a shack." The pressure against the door changed. A shoulder now. "Testing." Claire's fingers tightened in Michael's sleeve. He felt the tremor and steadied her without looking. "Rick," Michael said, voice flat. "You've got maybe 30 seconds before the mountain decides for you." "Open the damn door," Rick snapped, "or I'll open it myself." Michael stepped back from the frame, slow, controlled. He nodded once to Ethan. Ethan swallowed and moved, grabbing the axe from the corner grip, unsure but determined. He positioned himself to the side out of direct view. Michael reached for the flare gun on his belt. He didn't raise it yet. "Rick," he said, "you're not freezing. If you were, you wouldn't be yelling. You'd be conserving heat. You'd be begging." Another laugh. "Closer now. You're smarter than you look." "That's usually how it goes," Michael replied. The latch rattled. Hard. Michael didn't hesitate. He fired the flare through the narrow vent above the door, the red light screaming into the night. It lit the snow in violent color, cast long shadows that twisted the trees into something feral. Outside, Rick cursed, stumbling back. Footsteps crunched fast, retreating, then stopping. "You think that scares me?" Rick yelled. "All it does is tell me you're in there." Michael met Ethan's eyes. Ethan slammed the bolt into place, hands shaking but effective. The door held. Claire sucked in a breath sharp with adrenaline. "What did you just do?" "Bought us time," Michael said, "and told whoever's listening that we're not alone." The red glow faded. Darkness rushed back in heavier than before. They waited. Seconds dragged. The storm had softened to a steady hiss, like the mountain holding its breath. Footsteps returned, slower. Circling now. Rick was pacing. Thinking. "This isn't over," Rick called. "You can't hide forever." Michael stayed silent. He knelt by the door, ear pressed to the wood, counting steps, mapping movement. Outside, Rick moved left, then right, then farther away. Minutes passed. No knock, no voice. Ethan slumped against the wall, knees giving out. Jesus. Claire closed her eyes, then opened them again, sharper than before. "He knew," she said. "About me?" Michael glanced at her. He knew someone important was in that SUV. That's not the same thing. But he didn't ask for money, she said. He didn't threaten. He tested. Ethan looked up. Tested what us Claire said. To see who'd open the door. Silence settled thick with implication. The radio crackled again, sudden enough to make Ethan jump. This time, the voice was clearer. Search units mobilizing flare, sighted approach, delayed by terrain. Hold position. Michael exhaled slowly. They saw it. How long? Ethan asked. Long enough to make us wait, Michael said. Claire shifted, sitting up straighter despite the fatigue. Her voice steadied command, sliding back into place. Rick wasn't alone. Ethan stared at her. You don't know that. I do, she said. Because if he was, he would have rushed the door or left. He did neither. He wanted information. Michael studied her profile, the set of her jaw, the way fear had sharpened her thinking instead of dulling it. He had seen that look before. In people who survived things by learning fast. Who would want you badly enough to send someone up a mountain in a storm? He asked. She hesitated. Not out of fear, out of calculation. Someone who thinks I'm the problem. Ethan shook his head. You're not. She didn't look at him. That depends who you ask. Another hour passed. The cabin creaked as temperatures shifted. Michael rotated logs, careful to keep heat without smoke. His movements were efficient, economical, the kind that came from long habit. Claire watched him. Not with suspicion, with curiosity. You're not just a local, she said quietly. Michael shrugged. Depends what you mean. You read people, she said. You anticipated him. I listen, Michael replied. Most folks tell you what they're going to do before they do it. Ethan rubbed his face. So what now? Michael glanced at the door. Now we don't make it easy. As if summoned by the words, a light flared outside, sweeping across the trees. Not red this time. White, controlled. Ethan shot to his feet. That's them. Michael raised a hand. Not yet. The light passed once, twice, then cut out. A voice followed, amplified, professional. Forest Service. Anyone inside the structure, identify yourselves. Michael stood. Relief tugged at him, but he didn't let it show. He stepped to the door and called back. 3 occupants. No injuries requiring immediate extraction. The response came after a pause. Copy that. We're staging downhill. Terrain unstable. We'll approach at first light. Ethan sagged, relief flooding him. Claire closed her eyes, something like exhaustion finally breaking through. Michael stayed where he was. Listening, because somewhere out there between the search teams and the trees, Rick was still moving. He felt it more than heard it. The mountain hadn't finished speaking. Claire opened her eyes and met Michael's gaze. "When this ends," she said quietly, "it won't really end." Michael nodded. "Most things don't." Another sound reached them then, faint but unmistakable. A snowmobile engine, distant, cut short too abruptly to be accident. Michael's shoulders tightened. He turned back to the door. "Get ready," he said. Ethan gripped the axe again. Claire drew a steadying breath, her fear settling into focus. Outside, the night rearranged itself. Lines shifting in tensions, sharpening. And inside the cabin, the balance tipped not toward safety, but toward a reckoning that had been climbing the mountain long before any of them arrived. The engine didn't roar this time. It crept, low, careful. The sound slipped between the trees like a thought that didn't want to be noticed. Michael felt it in his chest before his ears caught up a vibration, too controlled to belong to panic. "That's not rescue," he said. Ethan's grip on the axe tightened knuckles white. "They said they were staging downhill." "They are," Michael replied, "which means whoever that is knows the same terrain." Claire rose slowly to her feet, using the wall for balance. Her face had changed. The fear was still there, but it had been reorganized, filed into something colder. Purpose. "They're not here for me," she said. "Not directly." Michael looked at her. "Explain." "They're here to see what I do," she said. "Whether I run, whether I hide, whether I open the door." The engine cut out again. Silence rushed in, thick and expectant. Michael moved to the small window near the back, careful to keep his outline broken. He lifted the edge of the frost just enough to see. A figure stood near the tree-line helmet on visor down. Another shape moved farther left, slower, deliberate. They weren't rushing. They were mapping. "2 of them," Michael said quietly. "Minimum." Ethan swallowed. "So what's the play?" Michael didn't answer right away. He stepped back, eyes moving from door to window to stove calculating angles, weight, sound. This wasn't a siege. It was pressure. Claire spoke before he could. "They want leverage, not blood." Ethan snapped. "How do you know that?" "Because if they wanted me gone," she said, "I wouldn't have made it off the road." That landed hard. Michael studied her again, not for fear this time, but for alignment. She wasn't guessing. She was remembering patterns. The radio crackled, a new voice lower, closer. "Visual on structure, no movement hold." Michael reached down and turned it off. "No more information for free," he said. Outside, a flashlight beam swept the cabin slower now, deliberate, like a finger tracing a scar. A knock came. Not on the door, on the side wall. Soft, almost polite. Claire flinched. Not from the sound, but from the familiarity of it. "That's him," she said. "The one who likes to talk." Michael stayed still. The voice followed, muffled but clear. "Claire Whitman. You don't know me, but I know you." Ethan took a step forward. Michael stopped him with a look. The voice continued. "This doesn't have to get complicated. We just want to make sure you're safe." Claire let out a quiet, humorless breath. "That's a lie." Michael glanced at her. She met his eyes, steady. "You can tell him to go," she said. "But he won't." The voice tapped again, this time harder. "Come on. You don't belong out here with these people." You belong where decisions get made. Michael's jaw set. These people, he said, softly. Claire closed her eyes for a beat, then opened them. When she spoke, her voice carried clear and controlled. You should leave. A pause. Then a laugh. Different from Rick's. This one was smooth. Practiced. See, the voice said. That's what I needed to hear. Michael felt it then. The shift. This wasn't about entry. It was about confirmation. The footsteps retreated unhurried. Ethan whispered, "That's it. He's just leaving." "No," Michael said. "He got what he came for." Claire exhaled slowly. He wanted to hear me sound like myself. Silence settled again, heavier than before. The engine started once more farther this time, then faded into nothing. Michael stayed by the door long after the sound was gone. Minutes passed, then more. No knock, no light. Finally, Ethan sagged. So what now? Claire turned to Michael. Now they wait. And so do we. The cabin felt smaller, not from fear, from clarity. Michael sat back down, stretching his leg carefully, blood roaring back into it. Pain flared, then settled. He ignored it. "You're not just a CEO," he said. "Not accusing, not impressed. You're something else." Claire considered him. "And you're not just a local." A thin smile touched his mouth. "No." She studied his hands, the way they moved. The absence of hesitation. "You've been underestimated before." Michael didn't answer. Outside, the sky began to change, not brighter, but thinner. Dawn was thinking about it. The radio crackled again, this time with authority. "Approach team, moving 15 minutes. Ethan slumped in relief. Thank God. Michael didn't relax. 15 minutes is a long time. Claire nodded. Long enough for messages to be sent? Ethan looked between them. Messages to who? To people who will pretend this never happened, Claire said. And to people who won't. She walked to the window, peered out, then back. When this ends, they'll say it was weather. Bad luck. An unfortunate detour. Michael stood. And you? And I'll let them, she said. For now. Another sound reached them then. Not an engine, not footsteps. A distant thump. Helicopter rotors far off, struggling against the thinning storm. Ethan laughed, shaky. That's rescue. Michael nodded once. That's pressure. Claire closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had settled into place. Resolve, not relief. She turned to Michael. They'll ask questions. They always do, he said. And you won't answer all of them. No. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Good. The helicopter grew louder, lights cutting through the trees, bouncing off snow and shadow. The cabin filled with white flashes rotor wash, shaking the walls. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker. Occupants inside the structure prepare for extraction. Ethan let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Michael moved to the door hand on the latch, then paused. He looked back at Claire. "This is where things split," he said. "You go one way, I go another." Claire stepped closer. Not entirely. Their eyes locked. Something unspoken passed between them. Not romance. Recognition. Michael opened the door. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. Rescue lights flooded the cabin. Figures moved fast, efficient, practiced. As they stepped out into the dawn, the mountain finally released its grip. But somewhere beyond the reach of rotors and radios, the real storm had only just begun. Cold air rushed in as the door swung wide, sharp enough to bite through adrenaline. The rescue team moved fast, boots crunching, voices clipped and professional, every motion drilled. Michael stepped back instinctively, letting them take the center of the room. He watched hands, not faces. Hands told the truth. Ma'am, a medic said to Claire, already scanning her with a light. "We're going to get you out of here." Claire nodded once. No protest, no questions. She was calm in a way that unsettled people who expected gratitude or panic. She glanced at Michael, just a flicker, then looked away as if memorizing the moment without wanting to mark it. Ethan moved toward her, relief and tension tangling in his posture. "I'll go with her," he said quickly, too quickly. A second rescuer shook his head. "One at a time. Weight limits." Ethan hesitated, then backed off, jaw tight. Michael caught the look. Not anger, something closer to realization, the kind that arrived too late to change anything. They wrapped Claire in a thermal shell, movements brisk but careful. She winced once when they lifted her, then steadied herself, refusing to be fully carried. Pride, Michael thought. Or habit. Sir, another rescuer said to Michael, "You're next." Michael shook his head. "I'm fine." The man frowned. "You were exposed." "I live here," Michael said. Not defiant, just factual. The rescuer hesitated, then nodded. "We'll check you anyway." Outside the helicopter waited rotors biting the air lights, strobing across the snow. The mountain looked smaller in that light, less mysterious, less forgiving. They moved Claire first. As they guided her toward the open clearing, she turned back once her gaze finding Michael through the chaos. Her mouth opened as if to say something, then closed. The moment passed, swallowed by noise and motion. Michael watched until she disappeared into the glare. Ethan hovered near him, hands shoved into his pockets as if that could hold him together. "You saved her life," he said, voice rough. Michael didn't respond. "I mean it," Ethan pressed. "You didn't have to stop. You didn't have to do any of this." Michael finally looked at him. "Most things that matter," he said, "aren't obligations." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. "They're going to ask questions. They always do. And you'll just disappear." Michael shrugged. "I already did." The medic finished checking Michael's vitals, scribbled something, then waved him toward the helicopter. Michael followed, joints stiff now that the danger had eased. Pain waited patiently for moments like this. As he stepped into the clearing, the sound of the rotors softened, as if the mountain itself were listening. Snow lifted and fell in chaotic spirals. The helicopter felt unreal. A machine from another world dropped into this one without permission. Claire sat strapped inside, eyes open alert. She watched him approach, her expression unreadable. When he climbed in opposite her, The noise swallowed everything else. No words passed between them. None were needed. The helicopter lifted ground, falling away, the cabin shrinking below until it was just another shape swallowed by white. Michael felt the familiar dislocation of leaving something unfinished behind. They flew in silence, broken only by clipped communication between the pilot and ground teams. The town appeared slowly, lights blinking awake, a fragile human grid laid against the vastness of snow and stone. At the small medical facility, they separated again. Claire was wheeled down a bright corridor. Ethan followed already, speaking into his phone, voice low controlled. Michael stood alone near the entrance hands, shoved into his jacket, watching steam rise from his breath. A sheriff approached, hat low, eyes sharp. "You Michael Carter?" Michael nodded. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Michael glanced once toward the hallway, where Claire had disappeared, then back. "Depends." The sheriff smiled thinly. "On what?" "On whether you're here to understand," Michael said, "or to tidy things up." The sheriff studied him for a long moment, then gestured toward a bench. "Sit." They talked. Not long. Enough. Michael answered what mattered and left the rest untouched. He had learned years ago that silence could be precise if used carefully. When it was over, the sheriff stood. "You did good tonight." Michael didn't respond. Praise felt strange after survival. Outside, dawn had fully broken. The storm was gone, leaving the world sharp and quiet, as if scrubbed raw. Michael stood there longer than necessary, breathing in the cold, grounding himself in the ordinary act of being alive. A nurse stepped out. "Sir Ms. Whitman asked if you were still here." Michael paused. The part of him that liked clean endings bristled. The rest didn't. He followed the nurse down the hallway, the smell of antiseptic replacing wood smoke. Claire lay propped up on a bed, color returning to her face, eyes clear, now focused. She looked smaller without the mountain around her, or maybe more real. Ethan stood nearby, silent. The nurse left them alone. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Claire did. "They'll say it was weather." Michael nodded. "It usually is. And you'll go back." "Yes." She studied him, searching for something she couldn't name. "You won't take anything for this." Michael shook his head. "Didn't do it for that." Ethan shifted. "Claire." She raised a hand, stopping him. Her eyes never left Michael. "I don't forget people who show up when it costs them something." Michael met her gaze. Calm, unmoved. "That's your burden, not mine." A flicker of something crossed her face. Respect, maybe. Or relief. She nodded slowly. "Then let me carry it." Michael stepped back. The room felt too small now, too enclosed, like the cabin had been compressed into clean walls and bright lights. "I should go," he said. Claire watched him turn away. Just before he reached the door, she spoke again, softer. "Michael." He paused, not turning. "You didn't ask," she said. "But you should know. The people who came looking last night, they weren't wrong about one thing." He waited. "This isn't over." Michael smiled faintly, a line more than an expression. "It rarely is." He left without another word. Outside, the town moved into its morning rhythm. Trucks started, doors opened, life resumed indifferent and persistent. Michael walked to where his old pickup waited, dusted with snow exactly where he'd left it. He sat for a moment before starting the engine, hands resting on the wheel, feeling the echo of the night settle into something quieter. Behind him, in a hospital room filled with light, Claire Whitman stared at the ceiling and understood, perhaps for the first time in years, what it meant to owe someone nothing and still be changed forever. The knock came 3 days later, soft but deliberate, the kind that assumed the door would be answered. Michael was at the sink, hand submerged in cold water, working stiffness out of his fingers, when he heard it. He dried them on a towel that had outlived its color and crossed the small kitchen without hurrying. 2 men stood on the porch. Neither wore a uniform. One was older silver hair, cut close posture, easy in a way that suggested authority without announcement. The other was younger eyes, alert jacket, too clean for the road. "Michael Carter?" the older man asked. Michael didn't nod. "Depends who's asking." The older man smiled faintly, as if he appreciated the restraint. "Daniel Rowe. This is my associate. We'd like a few minutes." Michael looked past them at the yard, the tree line beyond the sky clean and sharp after the storm. "You've got one." They stepped inside. The younger man scanned the room, cataloguing. The older one didn't. He stood where Michael indicated and waited. "You were present during a rescue," Daniel said. "Up on the ridge?" Michael poured coffee into 3 mismatched mugs, slid 2 across the table. "That happens." Daniel didn't touch his cup. "It doesn't usually happen the way it did." Michael leaned against the counter. "If you're here to congratulate me, you're late." Daniel studied him, then nodded. "Fair enough." The younger man finally spoke. "We have reason to believe there was an attempted interference with rescue operations." Michael's eyes flicked to him, then back. "You mean the man at the door?" Daniel's eyebrow lifted. "You noticed?" "I listened," Michael said. "Different things." Silence stretched. The clock on the wall ticked steady and indifferent. Daniel folded his hands. "We'd like your account. In detail." Michael took a sip of coffee. "You'll get what matters. And the rest," Michael shrugged, "belongs to the mountain." Daniel smiled again this time, without warmth. "You're careful." "I'm tired," Michael replied. The younger man shifted. "There are questions about Miss Whitman's presence on that road." Michael's jaw tightened. "Those aren't mine to answer." Daniel raised a hand, cutting the associate off. "We understand." He leaned forward slightly. "What I want to know, Mr. Carter, is why someone would test a cabin in a storm." Michael met his gaze. "Because they thought the door would open." Daniel nodded. "And it didn't?" "No." Why not? Michael's voice stayed level. "Because it wasn't their door." Daniel held his gaze a beat longer, then sat back. "That's all for now." The younger man looked like he wanted more. Daniel stood. At the door, Daniel paused. "If anything else occurs, you'll reach out." Michael opened the door. "If it does." They left. The porch creaked once, then fell quiet. Michael watched their car disappear down the road, then closed the door and stood there, hand on the frame, feeling the shape of the visit settle into his bones. He had been underestimated before. He had learned to let that work for him. That afternoon, he drove into town for supplies. The grocery store buzzed with the low hum of routine. He nodded to familiar faces, accepted the quiet looks that asked questions without words. News traveled fast here, but it traveled sideways, reshaping itself as it went. At the checkout, a woman leaned in, voice lowered. "You hear about the helicopter?" Michael slid cash across the counter. "I heard the wind." She smiled, unsatisfied, but let it go. Outside, a black sedan idled across the street, engine running. Michael noticed it, then didn't. He loaded his groceries and drove home the long way, cutting past the river where ice broke slow and loud, a reminder that pressure always found a release. That night his phone rang. He didn't answer it. He listened to it stop, then start again. On the third ring, he picked up. Michael Clare said. He closed his eyes briefly. "You shouldn't call." "I know," she replied. "That's why I am." He waited. "They're moving pieces," she said. Quietly. "Faster than they should." "You're out of the hospital," he said. "Yes." "Then go where you're safest." A pause. "That used to be a place," she said. "Turns out it's a person." Michael's voice stayed calm. "That's a mistake." "Not if I don't make you responsible for it," she said. "I'm not asking for protection. I'm asking for clarity." He looked out the window at the dark at the yard, holding its breath. "Clarity comes with cost. I can afford it." "That's the problem," he said. Silence stretched between them. Not awkward, not warm. Honest. "They're going to frame the narrative," she said. "Weather. Bad timing. A local misunderstanding. And I'm going to let them," she said. "For now. But there's something you should know." Michael leaned against the counter. "Go on." "The man who came to the cabin," she said. "He wasn't there for me. He was there to see how you'd respond." Michael's expression didn't change. Then he got his answer. "So did I," she said. He could hear the city in the background, distant horns' voices layered over glass and steel. Two worlds touching at the edge of a line neither wanted to cross. "You're not invisible," she said. "You're just quiet. That scares the wrong people." Michael exhaled slowly. "You should hang up." "I will," she said. "After I say this." He waited. "They're going to underestimate you again," she said. "And I'm not going to stop them." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Good." She laughed softly, surprised. "You're not worried?" "I'm prepared," he said. The call ended. Michael stood there a long moment, listening to the house settle to the night, press close. He moved to the desk in the corner, pulled out a worn notebook, and opened it to a page already filled with neat, deliberate handwriting. Names, times, distances, patterns. He added one more line. The next morning, a town meeting was announced. Emergency preparedness. Open forum. The flyer was taped crooked to the board outside the post office, fluttering in the breeze. Michael read it once, then walked past. Across the state in a room with glass walls and quiet power. Claire Whitman sat at the head of a table she did not claim. She listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, it was to ask questions that forced answers without revealing her hand. They were both waiting. And the people who thought the mountain had been the worst of it were about to learn how wrong they were. The first thing Michael noticed at the town meeting was the silence. Not the polite kind. The kind that arrived early and waited. Chairs scraped softly against the floor of the community hall as people settled coats folded over laps. Hands clasped eyes, drifting toward the front, where a projector hummed without an image. He took a seat near the back, where exits were easy, and faces revealed themselves before voices did. A man at the podium cleared his throat. County badge. Clean boots. He smiled the way officials did when they planned to control the pace. "We appreciate everyone coming out," he said. "This is about safety, communication, preparedness." Michael leaned back and watched the room breathe. The questions started small: plowing schedules, road closures, cell coverage. Then a woman stood, grey hair pinned tight, voice steady. "We had a helicopter last week. Lights everywhere. Nobody told us why." The badge smiled again. "Rescue operation, weather-related." Michael felt the lie land like a coin on wood. Neat, flat, designed to be moved along. Another hand went up and went. Then why were there unmarked vehicles near the ridge? 2 nights later, the badge hesitated. Just enough. Across the room, a door opened and closed. Heads turned. A woman entered without hurry. Coat dark posture, unassuming eyes, scanning without appearing to. She did not look like she belonged there, which was precisely why she did. Michael felt it then, the click of alignment, quiet and exact. Claire Whitman took a seat 3 rows ahead, slightly off-center. No entourage, no announcement. She folded her hands and listened. The badge recovered. "We coordinate with multiple agencies. I can't speak to every vehicle." A murmur rippled. The silence sharpened. Michael raised his hand. Not high. Just enough. The badge nodded, relieved to return to a familiar shape. "Yes, sir." Michael stood. The room adjusted around him. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. "If this is about preparedness," he said, "then say what we're preparing for." The badge's smile thinned. "Sir, this isn't the place for speculation. It's the place for clarity," Michael replied. "Speculation happens when you withhold it." A few heads nodded. Others stiffened. The badge shifted his weight. There was no threat. Michael held his gaze. Then why did someone test a locked cabin during a storm? The room went still. You could hear the projector fan. The scrape of a boot somewhere near the wall. The badge opened his mouth. Closed it. "I don't know what you're referring to." Claire leaned forward slightly. Not enough to draw attention. Enough to hear. Michael continued, voice even. Someone knocked. Asked questions that didn't fit the weather. Left when they got answers. That wasn't rescue. That wasn't lost. A man near the aisle muttered, "I heard about that." The badger's jaw tightened. "Sir, I'm going to ask you to sit down." Michael didn't move. "You can ask." Claire stood. The room turned to her as one. Not because she demanded it, but because gravity had shifted. She did not introduce herself. She didn't need to. Her voice carried the weight of rooms that made decisions and expected obedience without asking for it. "I was in that cabin," she said. A breath moved through the hall. Recognition traveled fast when it had somewhere to land. "There was an attempt to access us," Claire continued. "It failed. Not because of weather. Because someone chose caution over convenience." The badge stared at her. "Ma'am." "Let me finish," she said calmly. He did. "I'm not here to complicate your message," she said. "I'm here to complete it. There are people who believe this town is quiet enough to overlook. They are wrong." Michael watched the badge's face change the calculation, rearranging itself under pressure. A man in the second row stood. "Who are you?" Claire met his eyes. "Someone who owes this community the truth." The room absorbed that. Older faces leaned in. Younger ones stiffened. The badge tried again. "This is not appropriate." "It is necessary," Claire said, "because silence creates risk, and risk finds the unprepared." She gestured lightly toward Michael without looking at him. The man who refused to open that door did not do so out of fear. He did it because he understood boundaries. That understanding kept 3 people alive. The badge's authority wavered just enough to be noticed. A woman near the back spoke up. "Are you saying we're in danger?" Claire paused. Chose precision. "I'm saying attention has a cost, and this town has recently received it." Michael felt the room pivot. Not into panic, into readiness. The badge cleared his throat. "We can coordinate resources, increase patrols." "You should," Claire said. "And you should tell people why." Silence stretched, then broke into murmurs. Not chaos. Consensus forming slow and deliberate. Michael sat back down. His role was finished. He felt Claire's gaze brush him, then move on. After the meeting, people clustered in small knots, voices low, questions sharper. The badge disappeared through a side door. No smiles now. Outside, night had settled clean and cold. Michael stood near his truck keys in hand when Claire approached. She stopped at a respectful distance, hands visible. Posture open. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I did," she replied. "For them, and for me. You made it public. I made it honest," she said. "There's a difference." He studied her face. Tired, focused, changed, but not softened. "They'll respond," he said. "They already are," she replied. "Just not out loud." They stood in the quiet, the building behind them exhaling as people drifted away. "You're not staying," Michael said. "No," Claire replied. "I'm moving things where they belong, and you'll draw heat." She nodded. "That's the point." A car rolled past, slowed, then continued. Someone waved. Michael returned it without thinking. Claire looked at his hand, then back at his face. "They underestimated you. They usually do. And you let it happen?" "Yes." A smile touched her mouth. "So do I." She stepped back. "This will get louder before it gets clean." Michael opened his truck door. It usually does. She hesitated, then spoke once more. If they come again? They won't knock, he said. And if they don't? Michael met her gaze. Then I'll already know. She nodded. Not a promise. An understanding. As she walked away, Michael felt the night settle into something watchful rather than afraid. The mountain loomed beyond the town, dark and patient as it always had. Attention had found them. But so had resolve. He drove home, slow headlights, cutting clean lines through the dark, the road familiar under his tires. Behind him, in offices lit too late, phones rang and plans shifted. In rooms far away, names were circled, then crossed out. The quiet had ended, and this time it had chosen the wrong door. The pressure didn't come with assuns or headlines. It arrived in smaller ways. A truck that idled too long near Michael's driveway. A county inspector who stopped by to check permits that had never been required before. A polite letter from a utility company suggesting adjustments to service routes. None of it loud, all of it intentional. Michael noticed everything and reacted to nothing. He split wood in the mornings, slow and methodical, letting the rhythm settle his thoughts. He fixed a loose board on the porch that had been loose for years. He drove Lucas's old truck into town and back without changing his schedule. The point was not defiance. It was normalcy. People who pushed quietly expected noise in return. Silence confused them. Lucas came home on a Friday night, grease still under his nails' shoulders, tense in a way that didn't match the familiar walls. He dropped his bag by the door and leaned against the counter, watching his father pour coffee. "You're being watched," Lucas said. Michael didn't look up. "So are you." Lucas frowned. "You knew I assumed." They asked questions at the shop. Lucas continued. "Not about the storm, about you." Michael slid a mug across the table. And I didn't answer," Lucas said. But they weren't subtle. Michael finally met his son's eyes. Were they polite? Lucas hesitated. Too polite. Michael nodded once. "That's how you know it matters." Lucas exhaled, frustration bleeding through. "You're acting like this is nothing." Michael took a sip. "I'm acting like this is something that doesn't need help growing." Lucas ran a hand through his hair. "I don't like it." "Neither do I," Michael said. But liking it was never part of the deal. Across the state, Claire Whitman sat in a room that didn't belong to her anymore. The glass walls reflected people who spoke carefully, who smiled when necessary, and avoided words that left marks. She listened. She always did. She had learned that listening made people reveal the shape of their fear. "They're escalating pressure locally," a man said, sliding a tablet across the table. "Small-town leverage, zoning, utilities, social discomfort." Claire glanced at the screen, then pushed it back. "They want him isolated." "Yes." "They won't get at it," she said. The man hesitated. "With respect, he's not protected." Claire's eyes lifted. "He doesn't need protection. He needs time." Another voice cut in. "This is becoming visible." Claire smiled faintly. "Good." The meeting ended without agreement. Claire walked out without waiting, heels clicking sharp and controlled. She stepped into an elevator alone and allowed herself one breath where no one could see it. Back in the town, the pressure found a new angle. A reporter showed up. She stood outside the diner with a microphone and a smile that promised warmth while measuring damage. Michael saw her before she saw him and turned down a side street. Not fear. Disinterest. The reporter pivoted anyway, following the trail of curiosity that always led to the quiet ones. By evening, the story ran online. Vague, suggestive. A local man. A storm. Questions about response protocols. Nothing false, nothing complete. Lucas read it on his phone and slammed it onto the table. They're circling. Michael finished cleaning his knife and set it down. Let them. They'll drag you into it. Michael leaned back. They already did. The next knock came after dark. Not aggressive, not soft, confident. Michael opened the door without hesitation. Daniel Rowe stood there again, coat dusted with snow, eyes sharper than before. He stepped inside without being invited. Things are moving, Daniel said. Michael closed the door. That happens. Daniel watched him closely. You don't seem concerned. I'm concerned, Michael replied. I'm not surprised. Daniel paced once, then stopped. There are interests involved here that extend beyond your town. Michael met his gaze. Then they should learn how towns work. Daniel smiled thinly. They're trying. And failing. For now, Daniel said. They want distance between you and Ms. Whitman. Michael didn't react. They won't get at it. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You sound confident. Michael shrugged. I know what I didn't do. Daniel studied him. And what was that? I didn't open the door. Daniel exhaled slowly. They're used to doors opening. Michael said nothing. Daniel moved closer, lowering his voice. You should leave for a while. Let this cool. Michael shook his head. If I leave it heats up. Daniel watched him measuring stubbornness against inevitability. You're not wrong, he admitted. But you're not safe, either. Michael opened the door. Then do what you came to do. Daniel paused at the threshold. This ends one of two ways. Michael met his eyes. It always does. Daniel left. The night settled heavy and deliberate. 2 days later, the town received notice of a scheduled infrastructure audit. No reason given, no explanation required. People talked. Michael listened. Claire called that night. They're tightening, she said. I noticed Michael replied. They're going to force a choice. Michael leaned against the window, watching frost creep across the glass. They already did. A pause. You're not backing down. No. Neither am I, Claire said. Which means the next move won't be quiet. Michael smiled faintly. Good. You understand what that means, she said. Yes. Silence stretched between them. Not empty. Loaded. They think this is about control, Claire continued. They think it's about weather and access and optics. And it isn't, Michael said. No, she agreed. It's about who decides when the door opens. Michael's voice stayed calm. And who stands there when it doesn't? Another pause. Then softer. They don't know who you are. Michael closed his eyes briefly. They don't need to. But they will, Claire said. Soon. He looked out into the dark, the road quiet, the town breathing slow. Then they'll learn what the mountain already knows. The call ended. Michael sat there a long time afterward, hands resting on his knees, feeling the weight of the moment settle. The pressure was no longer subtle. It was aligning, preparing. Somewhere lines were being drawn by people who believed power moved in straight paths. They were wrong. The storm that had trapped them in a cabin had been loud, violent, obvious. What was coming next would be quieter and far harder to escape. The move came on a Monday, the kind of day chosen precisely because people expected nothing from it. Michael was in town early, parked across from the county building, watching doors open and close as if they were breathing. He had been awake since before dawn, not restless, just alert the way he had learned to be, when silence felt engineered. Inside, Claire Whitman sat at a long table beneath fluorescent lights that flattened faces and sharpened intent. She wore no insignia of power, no armor beyond posture and patience. The men across from her spoke in turns, measured, rehearsed, their language dense with process and concern. They spoke of audits and safety reviews, of liability and oversight, of how narratives hardened, if not guided, early. They did not speak her name. They did not need to. When it was her turn, she did not defend herself. She did not deny. She placed a thin folder on the table and slid it forward without ceremony. Inside were timelines, call logs, access records, decisions that predated the storm by months. Not accusations. Context. The room shifted, chairs adjusted, pens stilled. Back outside, Michael saw the black sedan pull up and felt nothing. He crossed the street at an unhurried pace and entered the building through the side door he knew would be unlocked. He signed in with his name spelled clearly and took a seat where he could see both exits. No one stopped him. Not yet. The hearing room filled slowly. Officials, staff, 2 reporters who pretended to be invisible. When Michael was called, he stood without drama and walked to the table opposite Claire. They did not look at each other. They did not need to. The alignment had already happened. Questions came pointed and polite. Why had he been on that road? Why had he refused entry? Why had he fired a flare? Michael answered with the economy of a man who respected truth enough not to decorate it. He spoke of weather patterns, of terrain, of human behavior under stress. He spoke of the difference between need and insistence. He did not speak of fear. When pressed about the man at the door, Michael paused just long enough to let the silence work. He described the knock, the phrasing, the timing. He did not speculate. He simply told them what did not fit. The room understood the implication, without having it named. A man in a suit leaned forward, voice smooth. He asked Michael whether he believed he had authority to make such decisions alone. Michael met his eyes. He said that authority did not come from position in moments like that. It came from responsibility, from standing between danger and those who did not yet see it. The question did not come again. When Claire spoke, she did not thank him. She did not praise. She placed the storm back where it belonged, as catalyst, not cause. She spoke of patterns that predated the weather of interests that confused access with entitlement. She did not raise her voice. She did not lower it either. The room changed. By early afternoon, the reporters had stories they could not quite write. By evening, the black sedan was gone. By nightfall, the pressure that had been applied with such care, loosened, not released, just redirected elsewhere where it could do less harm. Michael drove home as the sky went dark, the road familiar beneath his tires. At the turn toward his place, he slowed not out of caution, but habit. The porch light was on. Lucas stood by the railing, hands in his pockets, waiting. "They called it off," Lucas said, as Michael shut the engine down. For now, Michael replied. Lucas nodded relief, and something like pride flickering across his face. "They didn't expect you." Michael set his keys down inside the sound, small and final. They never do. Later, after the house had settled and the night pressed close, Michael sat at the table with the worn notebook open in front of him. He closed it gently, not because it was finished, but because it no longer needed additions tonight. Across the state, Claire Whitman stood alone in her office city lights, stretching out beneath her like a map she had learned to read differently. She picked up her phone and typed a message she did not send. Some things did not need words. Some connections held better without them. The mountain remained where it had always been, indifferent and watchful. The cabin stood quiet again, repaired ready its door, still solid. The town breathed easier without knowing exactly why. Power had tested a boundary and found it firm. Not because of force, because someone had chosen not to move. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to like and subscribe and share your thoughts below by commenting 3 simple words. Stand your ground.